It was after they died. Who died? Aaron's two sons. They died before God. After we give the story of Aaron's two sons, then we introduce the laws of the Kohanim, not getting drunk. Based on that, a lot of rabbis say, what was the sin that Aaron, how did Aaron's two sons die? Their sons, his two sons were Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu. Does anyone know how they died? Anyone know? All right. So most opinions say they served in the temple drunk. When they inaugurated the temple, right, in the tabernacle in the desert. So these two guys, really big rabbis, they were so excited. They were partying, very hard. And they said, oh, let's go into the Holy of Holies. And they were intoxicated. They went, and the Torah describes, fire came out of their nostrils, right? And they died. It wasn't allergies. Although some people have that allergy response. Okay, so they died, and Aaron was quiet. In other words, he already accepted God's judgment, and he was actually rewarded for that. And the rule is, if someone dies at a great party, like a wedding, you're supposed to take them away and celebrate the wedding and then go back. It's a very fascinating rule in Jewish law. Jewish law deals a lot with emotions, but Jewish law says, as humans, you can't let emotions over control you. You have to have boundaries for them. You have to have a time when your emotions, when you enter the realm of emotion. So here they go. Aaron says, I'm not going to mourn now. Now's not the time. I got a job to do. We'll mourn after we finish inaugurating, after the days of celebration. And that's what they do. It's somewhat of a beautiful thing, actually, just to note, I've been by weddings where unfortunately someone in the family had like a heart attack and everything like that. And the rule is like, no, this is a happy occasion and we'll have a time for mourning. And that's in Jewish law. The Rebbe, actually, when his wife passed away, after 30 days, he said, I'm so sad, but what can I do? That Jewish law tells me that I have to start mourning less tomorrow after 30 days, after, the different stages of the mourning. So what can I do? Jewish law wants, it's not just about what I feel, but it's also about how I need to live my life. So that is, Jewish law gives a lot of space to emotions, but it gives it a certain context. So anyways, beautiful thing Aaron does, and they bury him. And Moses tells Aaron, he says, I knew something holy. People were going to die in really holy fashion. I thought it would be you and me, but it was your sons. Must be they're greater than me and you. This is what Moses tells Aaron. Yeah, you're following the story? All right. Already, it sounds interesting. Wait, 1 second. Were they drunken criminals or were they really holy, right? Yeah, which one was it? All right. So I remember when I first moved here, there was someone who wanted to convert. And Rochelle was actually there on Shabbos. We had a minyan on Shabbos in our old house. And I was going around, I was just saying l'chaim and drinking and everything. And they were Christian. They wanted to convert. And they were just so shocked that I was drinking, right? So, Jews obviously drink. Some do, some don't. But what is it? Were they drinking or were they drinking or were they drinking or were they doing something holy? So this is what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to enter a story from the Talmud, which is a very interesting story. Jerry's not going to believe it, but maybe when he grows up and he's an adult, he'll understand. All right. So I always pick on Jerry. Yeah, Jerry.
So,
huh? What? 1 second.
Jerry's a good sport, actually.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something, Rabbi?
Yeah.
It's really what you're talking about. Like, you're saying that, isn't it what you're talking about now? Isn't it like with mourning, we have the mitzvah of celebrating and I don't know, maybe it's even compartmentalizing it. I'm not really sure, but either way, it's an obligation to perform the mitzvahs, even if we're sad. So is it something like what you're talking about now?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking. Compartmentalizing. That's exactly what Jewish law does. In Jewish law, I'll tell you something really interesting. I saw this post by a lady who's like, "Oh, I ended up at a Chabad Seder, and totally, I'm not religious at all." But the rabbi said something really important. He said, "Why do we have Maror at the Seder where we're celebrating? Because Maror happens in life, but you got to take it and come, take time for it and then move on in life, right? So the Seder, we do it really fast. We have Maror and then we move on. So in Judaism, the premise of Judaism is the whole world is somewhat of a false reality. It's created by God for a mission. So we're in this world to do a mission. And we're going to talk about this more soon. But based on that, when we get hurt, we can't be so hurt because it's not so real, right? So therefore, the way we need to live our lives is the way we act is based on the way God tells us to. So God gives people a healthy amount of emotions. Sometimes he gives people even more than a healthy amount of emotions, right? And it's important for us to remember that, there are times we need to be joyous. Sometimes we're sad, but we got to do something anyways. Sometimes we're joyous. We have to do something sad, right? And knowing that everything has its context and has its place. And if you totally shut it off, it will usually backfire, because the same God that told us to be happy here and sad here gave us our emotions and gave us our soul. It gave us everything that we do and the way that we react and our tendencies. The same God did both of those things, and he wants us to learn how to balance them. We're going to talk about it today. Yes, Jerry, what were you saying?
Not a whole lot, but there was a famous Japanese cinematographer named Kurosawa who did some magnificent movies. And in one of these movies, there was a young man wandering around Japan in his more primitive areas. He comes into a village and there's a parade going on. People are playing musical instruments, having a great time. He says, "What's going on? What's going on here?" I said, "Mrs. So-and-so died." He said, "Well, why are you having a parade and playing musical instruments when Mrs. So-and-so died?" "Well, she lived to be 90 years old. She had a wonderful life. We're celebrating it."
Well, well, so, there are obviously different, reactions and different nowadays. I find in particular, younger people really have less control of their emotions. And sometimes it's hard for the older generation to have a certain perspective, and they'll try and teach their kids, and their kids will be like, "No, I feel this way, feel that way." But yeah, there are, in Judaism, one of the beautiful things is when someone does live really, really long and they pass away, we're sad and then we're happy, right? We do both. We make sure that we exhaust both things because in humans they exist. But that's very interesting. So anyways, let's talk about the story that Jerry is going to like. Now, Jerry, I know that one thing about you is that no matter your age, you always want to learn, right? So that's why I said that. When you're like 105 and 6, you'll like this story. Okay. So here is actually what the Midrash says. Now, there's a lot of interesting Midrashim on the beginning of this Parsha. So we said, it seems like they did the wrong thing. They were drunk. But on the other hand, it seems like they were doing something really holy. So what is it? So there's actually another interesting Midrash, very interesting Midrash. King Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem. King David bought the land and he got the blueprints together. But God said, King David, you have too much blood on your hands for a good reason. He had to fight villainous oppressors, right? But God tells King David, your son Solomon will have peace in his time and he will build the temple. So that's what happens. King Solomon builds a temple. Now, they finish building the temple, and King Solomon, he gets stoned. He gets totally drunk at this party. And the next morning, they're waiting for King Solomon to open the temple. He has the keys. He's the king, and he's sleeping with it under his pillow. They're waiting for him to open the temple, and he's sleeping, right? So King Solomon, he's an adult. He's young adult. Smartest man in the world is drunk, sleeping over his keys. So the Midrash says this fascinating story. And it says that his mother, right, his Jewish mom, is like, "Oh my God, where's my son?" She goes and she wakes him up very, very harsh. And actually, according to some opinions, we sing this paragraph called the Eshet Chayil on Friday night, right? It's about femininity. Some say King Solomon composed about his mother when she woke him up. But anyways, King Solomon, I mean, when King Solomon's sleeping, the Midrash says that God's like, what? I'm destroying the temple, destroying King Solomon. How could he do such a thing? So I think he abstained from alcohol for a lot of his life as a result because he overdid it. But that begs the question: is it okay if you don't overdo it? If what exactly is? So now I'm going to tell you a lot of other interesting thing before we get to this really cool story in the Talmud. The Midrash says a bunch of reasons why Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's sons, died. It says a bunch of reasons. One of them says they went into the temple, they went into the Holy of Holies, but they were wearing the wrong clothing. Kohanim in the Torah, right? We read about it on Yom Kippur. They have very precise clothing they need to wear. You can't just go in. In fact, if you're not wearing the right clothing, punishable by death penalty, right? Now, did anyone actually get killed because they wore the wrong clothing? No, because you had to go through so many checkpoints, right? If you were wearing the wrong clothing, you probably did it on purpose, right? But they were wearing the wrong clothing. That's the reason they died. Another reason it says in the Midrash, it says they didn't have children. Neither of them had children. Now, probably, I mean, it's not saying that they were infertile, but they probably by choice didn't have children. Another thing it says in the Midrash, it says they didn't have wives. They didn't have wives. They didn't have wives. So, most opinions say that all of these things were actually, all of these things were actually, now it's a mitzvah in the Torah to get married. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to have a wife, right? All these things actually were all true. It's not like a dispute. Sometimes when rabbis argue, they think that each other one is wrong. Sometimes when rabbis argue, they agree that the other person is right, but they say, perhaps you're putting the wrong focus, right? We may argue about something and say, this is more important, that's more important, right? So all these opinions, they're all right. They didn't get married, they didn't have children. They were bachelors having a good time, right? So that's what happened. That's why they died. These are the different opinions of the rabbis. So again, this begs the question a little bit more. On one hand, we have the fact that Moses said they were super holy, right? On the other hand, we have these things, they were like sinning, right? They didn't have children. They didn't have, obviously, if someone doesn't get married, and it's a problem if they can't get married, if they're not trying to, right? And that's their choice to try and find the right one, right? So they didn't get married, didn't have children, wearing the wrong clothing. Were they really holy or were they not really holy? So that's what we're going to address today. And they were drinking also. They were drinking. They went into the Holy of Holies at the wrong time. And therefore they died. No one killed them. They died natural death. Fire came out of their nose and it was heavenly punishment, right? Okay. So I'm going to explain with the story in the Talmud, and I'm going to read it in the Talmud. There's a lot of different versions of this. So because there's a lot of different versions, I'm going to kind of put them together because we don't have that much time. All right, any questions so far? So again, these are the guys we're talking about. We're talking about Nadav and Avihu.
How old were they, Rabbi?
How old were they? Good question. I'm not sure. I think they were like 11 and 12. No, I'm just kidding. I think 119 and 120. Nah, I'm just kidding, Jerry. Okay. I think they were young men. I think they were there. So I'll tell you, basically the way it would work in the olden days, if you were a Levite, your service in the Levite service would start when you're 25. When you're 25, you would study. It was like becoming a doctor, It took 5 years to study. They give you easy jobs, in Yiddish, lediger jobs, schlepper jobs, until you got 30. And then 30, you would do more serious jobs. Right? So again, you would start when you are, like, let's say 25. So they were probably over 30, right? Over 30. Yesterday, actually, in Shul, I said, too bad Jerry's not here. It's his favorite parsha. It talks all about finding the tzarat on your car or on your house, right? Finding and you have to destroy it. And I said, a Jewish person can get really ticked off. You just buy a new car and there's tzara'at on your car, and you try and repaint it and this and that. You got to destroy your car. Okay. Anyways, so there's a story in the Talmud, and this is a very interesting story. So again, we're talking about Nadav and Avihu, two young Jewish single men in their 30s, very holy. They are going they're going to be the heirs of the high priest, Aaron, right? They're very, very holy, and they go and they die. On one hand, Moses says, these guys are holier than me and you. That's why they died. On the other hand, they were, I don't know if they were alcoholics, but they were drinking on the job. You're not allowed to drink on the job, right? They were not married, no children, wearing the wrong clothing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Okay. So, so what was it? Were they really holy, or was it? Now, obviously, the answer is going to be they were both, but then we're going to talk about that. We learned a lot of interesting laws about this. So one we mentioned is Kohanim. Some say they can't drink. When the Kohanim do the blessing, was anyone there on the last day of the holiday when Mike Singer did the priestly blessing? Okay, so they do that. They're not supposed to drink before they do that. So on Simchas Torah, a bunch of people were here. So we did the priestly blessing on the afternoon. Someone did the priestly blessing on I don't know if anyone was here. We didn't have a Kohen on Simchas Torah, but we do it in the morning before the party because we're worried they're going to be drunk. They're not allowed to bless the other Jewish people while they're drunk. Rabbis, if they're drunk, they're not supposed to answer complex questions on Judaism. Now, they're allowed to answer philosophical questions, right? But they're not allowed to answer legal questions. So let's say someone comes to a rabbi and they say, what's a typical question? Someone comes to a rabbi. They say, I warned my wife not to seclude herself. Now, that's an unusual question. They say, I accidentally mixed non-kosher. I accidentally mixed my chicken soup with a dairy spoon, right? Can I eat the soup? Can I eat the spoon? Use the spoon, right? That's probably a very common question. I'll be honest, I don't get that question so commonly in Prescott, but I do get that question. People do call me quite commonly from the East Coast, actually. That's a typical question. I mixed my milchik spoon in my fleishik soup with a milchik spoon. If a rabbi is drunk, he's not supposed to answer. He's supposed to say, come back to me when I'm sober. Okay, so we learn a lot of laws from this. Now, here's the story we're going to get into, and it's a very, very interesting story. The story is about four rabbis who went tripping. Four rabbis who went into supernal spiritual realms. They have what's called aliyas haneshama. Aliyas haneshama means they went out of their bodies and they went to spiritual realms to check it out. Those rabbis were very, very holy, very lofty rabbis. They were not on drugs. They really went to spiritual realm. They went to something what's called the Pardes. If you go up to heaven, one of the ways that it's called heaven is it's called the Pardes. Pardes means the garden. It's called the garden. It's like a spiritual garden. You go there, there's souls and this and that. Very, very interesting place. So they went up to the Pardes, and there were four rabbis, and I'm just going to read to you the excerpt in the Talmud. Very interesting story. In this story, it's loaded with mysticism. So I'm not going to go into it so much. It's loaded with mysticism. We're going to focus more on lessons from it. It says in the Talmud in Chagiga, it says, Tana Rabbanan, Arba nichnasu lePardes. There were four rabbis who went to Pardes. Pardes is, again, it's the supernal spiritual garden. The Elohim, these were the guys. Ben Azai, a guy who was named Ben Azai, the son of Azai. Ben Zoma, a guy who was named the son of Zoma. Acher, a guy who was called Acher. You know what Acher means? It means the other guy. Huh?
We have an Acher Park here.
Yeah, so he was called Acher. So his real name actually was Elisha, but they changed after this story. He became a heretic. He was one of the greatest rabbis of his time. He became a heretic, so they changed his name to Acher. They said he's the other guy. They didn't even want to say his name, huh?
Oh, I was just wondering. Are you talking about Gan Eden?
It's like Gan Eden. It's like the Garden of Eden, but there's all sorts of different levels. So this place is called Pardes. There's a restaurant in New York called Pardes after this story. Probably. All right. So Acher. I'll read you the story about him soon. So Amar Lahem Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was one of these four rabbis. He said, Kisha'atem magin etzel avnei shayish. When you come to the spiritual marble stones in heaven, spiritual marble stones. When you come to the spiritual marble stones, the pure marble stones, he tells them, Al Tomru, do not say Mayim Mayim. Don't say water, water. Okay, so this is what he tells them, this cryptic message. Cryptic message. Jerry, say Mayim Mayim.
Maya, Maya.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Okay. He tells them when you go up to heaven and you see these giant marble, clear marble stones. This is how he's describing them. These big, clear, transparent marble stones. Don't say Mayim Mayim. Don't say water, water.
Was it rectangular? Was it
What?
rectangular? What kind of stone was it? Rectangular?
I've never been there, but they obviously resembled probably large marble stones. Some of the largest marble stones you could find in that era were probably in front of the temple in Jerusalem. The temple was about 160 feet tall and it was like smooth marble. So it was done really, really carefully. But it was clear marble. But he says, Rabbi Akiva says, don't say Mayim Mayim when you go there, like Jerry just did. All right, don't worry. It's only. I also said it, right? So it's only a problem if you're there. So he says, don't say Mayim Mayim.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Shnemer davar shkarim leyachin leneged ein. It says in the verse, don't say false things in heaven. Right?
How would we
Mayim
know
Mayim.
that's false? Though?
All right, yeah, that's a good question. We'll wrap this story up. Don't worry. So these four rabbis,
Yeah.
Ben
Yeah,
Azai,
okay.
Ben Zoma, Acher, and Rabbi Akiva, they went up to supernal heaven place. These were really special, one-of-a-kind rabbis. I mean, they were not joking around. They knew their stuff. They really went to spiritual realms. There are other rabbis who did that in history. Most rabbis, if they tell you they're doing that today, you're going to want to know what they're smoking, right? That's just the way it is. Although there may be people today who can go into these meditational states, right? So Ben Azai went up and he died. Ben Azai went up and he died. Ben Zoma went up and the Talmud says he went out of his mind. Acher went up. He went up to the garden and he chopped down the plants. This is what the Talmud says. He chopped down the plants. Right? So what does that mean? He went and he became a heretic. Rabbi Akiva went in. He entered in peace and he left in peace. So here we got the four rabbis. Let me just review the story here. This is a great story. It sounds like a thriller. It sounds like, four guys going to some planet with a bunch of, probably extraterrestrial, and whatever they go and one guy dies.
Sounds like an overdose, actually. Sounds like they're overdose.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so here's four guys. One guy goes and he dies. One guy went and he went crazy. One guy went and he became a heretic. And one guy entered in peace and left in peace. Now, just before we explain the story, the commentaries ask, why does it say Rabbi Akiva entered in peace? It should just say he left in peace, right? It doesn't say how the other guys entered, right? You got the question?
Yep.
So why does it say Rabbi Akiva entered in peace? It should just say that he left in peace. Like everyone else, this guy died. It doesn't say this guy entered in peace and died, right? So here's four rabbis, and we're going to talk about the four different perspectives that they had and what exactly happened over there. Now, I'll tell you what happened with the heretic, with Elisha. Elisha is one of my favorite guys in the Talmud. He was a brilliant rabbi, one of the greatest scholars. And I'm not going to go into all the details of his life today, but that could be a whole other class and a lot of lessons we could learn from that. But Elisha ben Avuya was a great scholar. He entered the garden and he went and he saw there was an angel there. The angel is named Metatron, and he writes down good things that Jewish people do. Anyways, he came and he saw Metatron was sitting. Now, the main difference between heaven and earth is earth, people feel that they are basically in control of their life. We don't feel that there is an energy, God, which is doing everything. It's here, he's doing everything. We have very little control, right? But we just don't see it. In heaven, you do see it. Everyone feels God's presence. That's the difference between heaven and earth. When someone dies, their body has to go through what we call it somewhat a transition stage. Some call it punishment. It's very difficult when you're here in this world and you're all trying to survive and make money and do this and do that, and you're putting stuff away for later and everything. And then you go to heaven and oh, God's the only thing that matters here and God's taking care of everything. It's a very difficult transition, right? So he goes there and he sees this angel is sitting, and there's a rule. No one sits in heaven. You can't sit when you feel God's energy. You always stand at attention. This angel's sitting. So he says, wow, there must be two forces. There must be two gods, right? If this guy's sitting, this angel. Anyways, the Talmud says that it was a test for him. It was an image, right? But either way, he comes down from heaven and he says, wow, if there's two gods, right? It's like taxes. They always say that if you have one tax, it'll stay one. But once you have two, they start multiplying, right? If there is not one God, one and only God, and if there are two forces in the world, then there will be more and more and more, right? Once there's a place for something else besides God, then you never know where that place is. You never know when it will control your life, right? So in Judaism, we believe there's one God, one reality. He's in charge of everything. He does everything, period. So he came down to earth, and he was a rabbi. He now became a heretic. So he saw a beautiful harlot, beautiful whore, right? And he said, oh, let's spend the night together. Jerry, I think she was like 95. This was not in the golden age where people lived really long. So he came to her and he said, let's spend the night together. She said, but I can't. It was Shabbos. She said, I can't. So he said, why not? He said, because you're this big rabbi, right? So he saw there was like a vegetable in the ground. You're not allowed to pick vegetables on Shabbos. And he pulled the vegetable out. And he said, yeah, I'm the big rabbi. Look what I just did. So she said, wow, you must be Acher. You must be someone else. You must not be the rabbi that I recognize from the newspaper, right? You must be someone else. She just broke the law on Shabbos, right? So he became a heretic. The Talmud has some crazy adventurous stories with him being a heretic. But eventually the Talmud says his soul was saved. Yeah. Okay. So that's the story. Just a second. All right. We have Ben Azai. Ben Azai died. What was the thing with Ben Azai? He wasn't married. Ben Azai wasn't married. The Talmud says he wasn't married. We actually had him in the Talmud this year. We were studying, I don't know if you guys remember, it was a really funny class in the Talmud. We were studying how long is forbidden to seclude a lady forbidden to seclude herself with a man. Did anyone remember that? How long, Jerry?
20 minutes.
It was how long it takes to go
How
around
long?
the tree.
So how long does it take for them to have relations, right? That's what we said. So we said about 20 opinions, right? One guy says, as long as it takes to scramble an egg. One guy takes as long, right? And then one rabbi said his opinion, and everyone says, wait, how do you know you're not even married? So he said, oh, I heard from my teacher, right? Or God told me. Anyways, Ben Azai wasn't married. Ben Azai dies. Right? That's one guy becomes a heretic, one guy dies. Ben Zoma says he went crazy. What is the assumption that he went crazy? Well, sometimes when people experience spiritual experiences, it's hard for them to get back into the world. In fact, there are people, just like people who experience things in their life, which sometimes are so hard or so painful, it's hard for them to get back into normal life. It's like traumatic. He saw something so much greater in the world, perhaps, that he wasn't supposed to see. He wasn't able to. When we live life, we spoke about last week how there's energy and then there's reciprocals for the energy. Anyone remember? That's what we spoke about last week. When we live life, it's important for our soul, what we see, be in accordance to our brain. If sometimes you know too much, some people who are really unfortunately mentally ill, they sometimes know too much. Right? So Ben Zoma went, he knew too much. It was like too hard for him to come down and live regular life. Rabbi Akiva, what did we say with Rabbi Akiva? He entered in peace and he left with peace. Okay, so this is the story in the Talmud. They all went to the Pardes, 4 guys, 4 different, results. It was kind of like Survivor. They all went and they all experienced this great spiritual experience, but there are 4 different results. So what exactly is happening here? Why did we have these reactions? Why did Rabbi Akiva say, don't say water, water. Don't say mayim, mayim, right? Like Jerry did, and like I just did, right? He said, don't say mayim, mayim. And and also, why did it say Rabbi Akiva entered in peace? And through this, yeah.
I just have a question, actually. At the Seder, when we ask the Manishtan, and then we get the 4 answers, like the 4 different explanations and the 4 different answers, it just seems like it's kind of representative of the world and of different characters. It almost sounds like when you said the 4 rabbis went up, it kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Like the differences in people and the differences in natures.
So, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's related because we'll see the 4 rabbis' reactions. Now, let's start with Ben Azai. Ben Azai, right? Ben Azai, what was the problem? What was one thing we know Ben Azai didn't do perfectly right when he went up? Does anyone remember? How did Ben Azai die? He's the guy who died. What did I mention about him?
Wasn't married.
He wasn't married, right? Right? He
Thank
wasn't
you,
married.
Mendel.
So that's just like the story we said with Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's sons, right? They weren't married, right? So they both died. They weren't married, right? They both died. So let's talk about that first. Now, here is kind of the pulse behind the world. In Judaism, this is what we believe in mysticism. The pulse behind the world, time, everything like that is all moving from what the mystics explain, what the prophets explain, from what's called Ratzo and Shuv. Ratzo and Shuv, 2 words, Ratzo and Shuv. Jerry, don't say it. Ratzo and Shuv. Now you could say it. Here's what's going on. Every soul in the world is highly spiritual, highly spiritual. Our body is extremely physical. When I say physical, our body basically is like an animal, right? Some people in the world, they feel like, are humans better than animals? Are humans better than animals? So, it was interesting. I once heard a lecture about the history of humans and animals. It was very, very interesting. He was actually given by a Holocaust survivor. So I don't remember exactly, but he was saying about how there were different, offices in Europe, different religions and stuff like that. And in the world that were doing things to help save animals, but not to help save the Jews. Right.
Mm.
So there was interesting. I remember when I was a yeshiva student, someone had said that they heard on the radio back when radios were still roaming the world. They said that there was a question asked on the radio. What do you do if you have a house and you have a baby who's days old and you have a dog that's been with your family for years and years? Who do you save first? Right? Who do you save first? Right? What?
Are you asking? Dennis
So-
Prager had an answer to that. He took a survey.
Oh, well,
By the
so
way.
yeah, I mean, this was many, many years ago, but it was very interesting. My friend was telling
Yeah.
me some people called in and said right away the baby. Some people said, that's a tough question. Some people said the dog, right? Okay. Anyways, in Judaism, so in the world right now, we do have this, some people are saying, animals are humans are basically animals, right? What's the difference? We're a little
Yeah.
bit more advanced or this or that. In Judaism, this is what we believe. Our body is animalistic. It likes to survive just like animals. We a lot of times we think alike. We're more complex than animals. We're more complex. In fact, we're infinitely more complex with our minds, but we also like to survive. Our soul, right? Our soul likes purpose. Ultimately, one of the most interesting things about human beings is they're always looking for purpose. Human beings are always looking for purpose. People, when they want to protest, they want to do it with friends. They want to join a group. Sometimes I even get calls. People say, hey, I want to And you know any groups who are, working for a good cause? I want to help people. I want to do a good cause. What cause do you want to do? What cause do you want to do? It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. It's something good, anything good. So this is one of the things that we find with human beings. We have our godly part, we have our purposeful part, and we have our animalistic part, right? Now, the reason we are like that is because our soul is godly and wants to do a purpose and spiritual. Our soul is spiritual. Our soul doesn't really care about money or most physical things about life. And then our body is physical, right? So this is the kind of the dichotomy. And most things in the world, human beings' insecurities come from the balance of these two parts in their soul. There's the right thing and there's what I want. There's the feel good and then there's the purposeful, right? So what happens is a lot of times, what happened with Ben Azai is he wasn't married. He wasn't married, right? We're going to pick on him. He wasn't married. Now, every rabbi knows that when you get married, it's like the second half of your soul, right? When you get married, it's like the second half of your soul. A lot of times, women are very grounding to men. It's like men, what do men need to survive? They don't need anything. They need a bench at the park. They don't need anything. They'll eat from here, that. They don't need anything. A woman needs a house. She needs a house. She needs space to take care of, right? She needs an environment to take care of. So here's what happened. Ben Azai was never married. Why was he never married? Because he was very spiritual. Why didn't he get married? He said, once I get married, I'll have to take care of my family. I won't be able to study Torah the whole day. Right? He just wanted to study Torah the whole day. I'll have to take care of my kids, take care of the house, get a job, pay the mortgage. Right now, I just study Torah. Ben Azai was too spiritual. He was on the spiritual side of things. He went to heaven. He went to the Pardes. What happened to Ben Azai? Ben Azai was so attracted to spirituality. He said, oh no, I'm not going back. I'm not going back. I'm done. This is where I want to live. He died. His soul went up. His body didn't go to the Pardes. His soul went up and said, okay, I'm not coming down anymore. That's what happened with Ben Azai. Ben Zoma went, right? Ben Zoma went, and he had somewhat of a similar experience. We'll talk about the waters. Let's get to Rabbi Akiva in just a moment. All the different guys, they didn't know how to balance the spiritual world with the physical world. The spiritual world is so much greater. It's so much more infinite energy, beyond time. Do you know what it means to enter the realm beyond time? I don't really know what it means either, but it's pretty awesome, right? Beyond time and space. That's like an incredible experience. When Ben Azai went up, he didn't want to come down. He's like, this is what it's about. This is the truth. This is where God is. Ben Zoma as well. He came back to the world. He didn't know how to interact. Acharei, he went up to the world. He no longer could come down and see one God in this world. Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and he left in peace. What does it mean? When we asked the question, why did he enter in peace? Could have just said he left in peace, right? Here's what Rabbi Akiva did. Rabbi Akiva knew that so as long as he's alive in a human body, he has a mission in this world. He has a mission in this world. To become spiritual in this world, after he dies, he's going to be really, really spiritual, right? His soul will leave his body. His soul will be really spiritual. Before he was born, his soul was super, super spiritual. If he sent into this world, he has a mission in this world, right? When he went to heaven, when he went to the Pardes, he entered in peace. When he went to the Pardes, he entered in peace. He said, I'm not going here in order to have a spiritual adventure. I'm going here to bring back inspiration to transform the world. That's what the purpose of spirituality is for people. You go in and I'm going to go and bring it back. I'm not here to rest. I'm not here on vacation. I'm here to go. Nichnas, he entered it in peace. He said, I'm going to go and see how I could be a better Jew in this world. So he entered in peace and left in peace. The other rabbis, they went to experience what's up there. They went to become more spiritual. When they went to become more spiritual, it didn't end up good. The purpose of spirituality for a Jew is to take it down and live as a Jew. We said we have the animal side to us and the spiritual side to us. The purpose of spirituality is to take it and live with it in the world, bring it to the world. It's an interesting thing historically. But the synagogue, right? The purpose of the synagogue isn't to go be a Jew in synagogue. That is a mistake. The purpose is to go be inspired as a Jew and take it back home. Take it with you to work. A lot of times when you come to shul, the purpose is you need a recharge. When you study Torah, it's like getting a recharge, right? Now I know how to live my life. Now I know what to do with my home. Now I know what to do with my car. Now I know what to do with my family, right? That is the purpose of spirituality as Jews. That is the purpose of the Torah, to go and show us how to live in the world, right? That's what Rabbi Akiva understood. The other rabbis had a challenge with that. They said, is the job to be spiritual or is the job to be in this world? It was like a double life. Rabbi Akiva is like, no, I'm going to go collect spirituality and bond it with my life in this world. That's why Rabbi Akiva was not hurt, right? On the contrary, he became a better Jew. This is what happened with Aaron's sons. You know, when you drink sometimes, you become more spiritual. Some people don't, some people do, right? But there's mitzvahs, there's times to drink. On Purim, on Shabbos, every Jew's got to drink a cup of wine, right? Pesach, we drink 4 cups of wine. Alcohol has a tremendous potential in making you more spiritual, right? Some people overdo it, but some people have the right amount. But it's important to remember that alcohol is not an escape from the world. It's not so you should become more spiritual and escape from the world. It's sometimes when you drink a little bit, you lose inhibition. And now you're able to be more honest, you're able to be more spiritual. And when you wake up the next morning, you can become a new person. That is the Jewish purpose of alcohol. So when Shlomo HaMelech was building the temple in Jerusalem and he overdrank and he slept in, he said, that's not the purpose of the alcohol, to oversleep. The purpose is to bring the joy back into the temple the next morning. He wasn't able to do it. He said, okay, alcohol is not good for me anymore, right? Aaron's sons, when they were drinking, we said they were holy. When they were drinking, they were becoming more spiritual. When you drink, you lose touch with the reality, with the physical world, right? That's what happens when you drink. They lost touch. They weren't married, right? They didn't want to build a Jewish home in this world. They wanted to be more spiritual. They said, you know what? Let's go into the Holy of Holies. They weren't wearing the right clothing. You know, clothing are physical clothing, but they also represent the way we think, the way we act. In the Tanya, it says clothing is action. That's like how the soul expresses itself. Thoughts, speech, that's the clothing of the soul. They said, no, we're not so into transforming the world. We're into spirituality. Spirituality is great. So here's what they did. They went into the temple. They were in a very spiritual state. So spiritual that Moses said, he's greater than me and you. Moses said, he's greater than Aaron and myself, right? They were holier. Holy is good, right? But they weren't transforming the world. They were going into a state of spirituality and they weren't bringing it back into the world. They weren't saying, how can we bring this into our family? How can we bring this into our life? How can we go and transform the world? The lesson is twofold, essentially. A person needs spirituality, but he needs to remember that the purpose of the spirituality is to bring it into the world. So sometimes when we become too worldly, right? Or even sometimes we're fighting for purpose, right? For purpose. And sometimes we forget that we need to bring the purpose into our life. You know, there was someone once said to my wife, she says, really kind of funny. Someone said, Rabbi, what are you doing? What are Jews doing about people who are being separated from their parents at the border? Right? What are you going to do for the children? So I was talking to someone, my wife said, you know, maybe I'll try and be nicer to children around me. And maybe I'll try and help other families around me who, you know, are having a hard time with their family. Maybe we need to, you know, sometimes when you're looking to help someone, it's right next to you, right? And you lose focus because you're focusing on this great cause and this great purpose, right? And fighting for this great fight, you know? Nowadays, we kind of have it. Anyone who gets involved in fighting for different causes out there or protesting, they go basically the same 5 things, right? But sometimes there's things right around us that we can actually fix, we can actually do. So this is the lesson we learned from Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu became very, very spiritual. But the purpose of all spirituality is to bring it into the world. And it's important to remember when we're in the world that the purpose of the world around us is to bring spirituality in it. You need both. But you need to be like Rabbi Akiva. We need to go study Torah, pray, take the spirituality, and then start viewing our lives differently. You need both. You can't just be in this world. You can't just be spiritual. You need to fuse them together. Now, this is a really deep teaching from the Arizal, but I want to tell you what was wrong when Jerry said Mayim, Mayim. Jerry, what was wrong?
I should have said bear, bear.
Nothing was wrong when you said Mayim, Mayim. Nothing was wrong. Rabbi Akiva, he said, don't say Mayim, Mayim. He warned his friends. What was Rabbi Akiva telling him? So the Arizal says something really, really amazing. The Arizal says, when you go up to heaven, I haven't been there, but the Arizal was there. When we see big mountains, or we're really wowed by it, right? Now, the Grand Canyon, imagine it was much bigger, clear stone, even more beautiful. I mean, more and more beautiful, right? So in heaven, it's like infinitely beautiful. He said, you're going to go up and you're going to see the upper waters. In Genesis, it talks about the upper waters and the lower waters. He said, you're going to go up and see what is in the core of what God wants in all this world and all the spirituality. What is the core? What are you going to go? You're going to go up and see, the palace of God, so to speak, and all the grandeur and all the splendor. What are you going to see? You're going to see that God is obsessed with this world. He's obsessed with mitzvahs in this world. He's obsessed with the transformation in this world. It's like, imagine you go chamber after chamber in spiritual palaces, and you come into the innermost chamber, and what do you see? You see your own house, right? You see your own house. God says, that's where I want to be. I want to be in your house in the physical world. So he was telling his friends, he said, when you go up and you see the spiritual mayim, the spiritual water, which is like extreme grandeur and palace, and you go inside and you go deeper, deeper inside, chamber after chamber after chamber in this garden, right? You go into the palace and chamber after chamber, and you go inside and you see your own house. Don't say Mayim, Mayim. Don't say that there's two waters. There's over there, there's the spiritual realms, and then there's my life down here. Realize that everything that God wants is right with you in this world, in your own home, in your own situation. That's where God wants to be. He wants to be in you in your personal life. He said, when you go and you see, the prophets talk about how there's, zillions of angels and all sorts of extreme, beautiful spiritual splendor. And you go and you see in the core of it, God wants you in your home. Don't say that that's different than your actual physical home and home. That's actually where God wants to be. It's actually your house. Rabbi Akiva was telling the purpose of going into spiritual places is to bring back the energy into your home. If you just stay in this world, in the physical world, you won't know how to do it. You have to sometimes go higher, see the world from a different perspective, from a more spiritual perspective. But when you do that, and then you enter back in this world, that's what God wants. That's how you transform the world. So that was the sin of Nadav and Avihu. How did they die? Anyone remember how they died? Anyone remember how they died?
Nope.
They died because fire came out of the nostrils and burnt them up, right? They became so spiritual. They became so spiritual that their soul said, I don't want to be here anymore. This car, this body is gross. I don't want to be in this physical thing anymore. I want to leave. They didn't die. It wasn't really a punishment. It was like they wanted to leave the world and become spiritual. So God said, you left too much. Time to go, right? When as Jews, we need to go and we need to take the spirituality and we need to take the inspiration. We go to the synagogue, we pray every day. We got to take time to pray and be spiritual and meditate and think about God. And then we got to go right back in the battle and go transform the world. So that is what we'll talk about for today. I feel like the lesson for some people is that, a lot of people in the world search for spirituality. And it's important for them to remember that the purpose of the spirituality is to change the world and do something good down here. If they're, thinking about tefillin and talking about tefillin and praying about tefillin, but they're not actually putting the tefillin on, they didn't transform the world. They didn't do the purpose. And then you have other people on the other side. They say, no, life is tough, the survival of the fittest. After 120, you will become spiritual. The lesson for them is no, they got to find a place that they can go and enter. Find a holiday, a Shabbos, something that they're doing where they can go and they can recharge with the mission and come back right to the world and transform the world. So that is for today. Any questions?
Okay, I want to tell you something.